Hi everyone, this is the first chapter in Module 3 that, as I said in the introduction, discusses the group level dynamics or the group level factors that influence individual behavior as well as the individual's impact on these group level or team level structures. And in this chapter, we're going to find out or we're going to discuss everything to do with teams and groups. In fact, we're going to discuss and define what groups and teams are and distinguish, in fact, between the two. We're going to look at the evolution of these structures, how they come to be, and how they are actually reinforced. And we're also going to discuss some of the obstacles to the effectiveness of groups and teams. Well, let's begin by defining what a group is. And you might think to yourself, I kind of already know what a group is. I've been in many groups. But here the definition is very interesting. It says it's two or more freely interacting people who share collective norms and goals and have a common identity. So there are some criteria here to defining an entity as a group. One, it obviously has to be more than one person. But secondly, and very importantly, they have to be interacting. So just because you are part of an organization does not mean that you are part of a group. You have to be able to interact with each other. You have to have a free interaction, and therefore there has to be some connectivity between you all. Again, that those interactive people, in order for them to be a group, they have to share collective norms. We're going to see this term norms come up again. Norms are these expected behaviors. They have to act together accordingly and have commonality in terms of a goal, in terms of goals, I should say, and identity, meaning that they should be aware of each other and should have some type of common purpose that drives their behavior in the group setting. So that is, in a nutshell, the definition of a group. In an organization, you're likely to find two types of groups. You're likely to find a formal group, which is basically the group formed by the management of the organization to help accomplish its goal. So the management might form a project group to help create a new product. That would be a formal group because it was created specifically by the organization for some type of organizational purpose. And then in organizations as well, you might have what's termed informal groups. And this is when the members' overriding purpose of getting together is really more so about friendship than it is really fulfilling some kind of organizational goal or organizational purpose. So within an organization, you might have a group that, let's say, come together to work out, or somebody, some people in the organization that kind of come together, create a group to have lunch or something like that, or to have a book club. All of these are groups because, again, they're interacting, they have some norms, they have some behaviors that are common, and they have a goal that is common, but they are not created specifically by the organization, and therefore they cannot be termed a formal group. They are, in fact, an informal group. Well, groups, especially formal groups, do actually fulfill both organizational functions as well as individual functions. As we mentioned before, if an organization created a group, a project or a product group around creating a new product, then there is obviously benefits for the organization there. The organization is able to accomplish some very complex tasks that requires the expertise and the knowledge base from people in multiple areas of the organization. And it's not something that one person could have potentially done on their own. And so the organization benefits from creating a group. And that's an organizational function. But individuals, being members of teams, being members of groups, they also benefit. And one of the ways that an individual benefits by being a member of a group is by satisfying that need for affiliation. If you go back to McClelland's theory that we discussed earlier, there is a need that we have for affiliation to be sociable, and that can actually be a very, very good way, being part of a work group, being part of a formal group, for us to fulfill this need. It also mentions an individual function is that it provides or it enhances an individual's self-esteem and identity. I am part of something greater than myself. It makes me feel good about myself. It makes me or gives me value. Well, how do teams actually evolve? How do they develop? And this gentleman, Tuckman, created what we call the five-stage theory of group development. And you'll see it begins at the very first stage. We go through this period of forming. And in forming, it's kind of all about introductory phase. Who are we? Who are you? We're asking each other. We're kind of trying to feel each other out. In this phase, it says in the individual, it's how do I fit into all this? What am I supposed to do here? And then the group issues, like, why are we here? Think about your own groups. Groups in class, in your class projects, and that's kind of the first question. Hey, how are you? You're asking yourself, what are we supposed to do again? Excuse me, what are we supposed to do? That's the forming stage. The storming stage is really where things kind of get heated up. It's a little bit of a conflict. People are trying to juxtapose, figure out who should be the leader. What am I supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? Why are you saying this? Why are you taking control? That's the storming phase. The norming phase, we start trying to become a little more cohesive, and then that will allow us hopefully to get to the performing stage. Once we perform, we then adjourn. We then basically end the project, we end the group assignment, and then we move on. But let's look at these phases in more in depth. So group one, as we mentioned before, is the forming stage. And it says here, group members tend to be uncertain and anxious about their roles, the people in charge in the group's goals. Okay, you're now beginning the group development process. So think about it. You don't know these people. And again, I ask you to use the example of your class group assignments. When you first kind of meet these people, you're not really sure about them. You don't want to tell them too much. You don't necessarily want to volunteer too much because you're still uncertain. As I said here, mutual trust is low, of course, because there is no real relationship there. It's really about trying to find out about people and really trying to kind of understand as an individual, what are you supposed to do, as well as a team or a group, trying to figure out why are you here, what is the purpose, and essentially how we're going to go about doing this. In the forming stage, there isn't a lot of conflict yet because people, as I said, are kind of feeling each other out, but there is definitely a high level of uncertainty. Well, while there was a level of nicety in the forming stage and everybody kind of was on their manners, in the stage two, we get to a little more of a conflict type scenario. This is what we call a time of testing. People are testing the waters, they're pushing the boundaries, they're trying to figure out, what they can do and what they can't do in the groups. And they also start questioning the power, the leadership. You might hear a statement like, well, who made you a leader? Why are you telling me to do these things? I can decide for myself. At this stage, you're really not yet a group. And the reason why you're not yet really a group is that while you might be there for some type of common purpose, and while you might be interacting, you haven't developed the common goals and norms yet. A lot of people haven't just kind of bought into this whole group structure yet, so they still see themselves as individuals. And in those instances, procrastination may occur. Well, I don't feel committed to this entity, whatever we are, and so I may not necessarily give my best effort. At this stage, there can be a lot of in group fighting. There can be a lot in politics. There can be a lot of vying for power and these kinds of things. And so if groups, as you will see, do not move beyond this, they will never actually perform. Well, how do groups get over stage two, that whole conflict stage of storming? Well, they essentially have to get over themselves as individuals many times, and they have to start seeing that they need to accept roles, that they need to go beyond the personal bickerings that you often see in storming, and really try to find some type of common purpose, some type of common goal, and work towards it. And that's why we call stage three norming. And it says questions here about authority and power resolved through unemotional, matter-of-fact group discussion. So let's kind of take all these personal issues aside and let's get really down to why we are here, that we need to work professionally with each other, and let's find a way to do that. And it says here group cohesiveness, a we feeling occurs at this stage. And this is really where the group becomes the group, because you have the commonality of goals through this norming process, through the acceptance of why I am doing this, through your acceptance of a role as an individual, and then you then find yourself now being committed to a group structure rather than seeing yourself as just this individual entity that just happens to have to interact with these people. So in this stage, you have that higher level of cohesiveness that is necessary for performance. So once you've normed, the next stage is obviously to perform, to do the task. You're focused now on solving your problems. You're not focused on figuring out, why are we here or how do we get along with each other. No, you're focused. The salience of the project is now switched to the task, and there's a climate of open communication, strong cooperation, and lots of helping. Think back to the forming stage. High levels of uncertainty, low levels of trust. The reason why there is a greater level of communication, people are willing to share now, people are willing to work with each other, people are willing to trust each other, is because you've in fact gone through the storming and norming phase. You've kind of gone to battle with each other, and you've decided and you've resolved your issues, and you've now built some type of framework that can withstand those types of conflicts, and that has allowed you to mutually trust each other. So while storming may not necessarily be seen as a good thing, it can actually benefit the group and the group dynamics and the group's performance by increasing the level of trust, because of the maturity of the individuals and the maturity of the group. And then the last stage is, once you perform the task, is to adjourn it. Work is done here, and it's time to move on to other things. And you have to sometimes in a group find ways to transition people back out of the groups, okay? This is a difficult, maybe somewhat of a difficult phase for groups, especially for those that have been working together for a long time. They might not necessarily want to leave, but when the project is ended and there is no longer any real function for the group, then we have to adjourn. While people occupy multiple roles in a group, and the roles are expected behaviors for a given position, what are you supposed to do? There are two general types of roles that members can play in groups. One is called a task role. And a person that occupies a task role, they enable the group to define, clarify, and pursue a common purpose. This is the persons that essentially decide or helps the group decide what they should be doing, how they should be doing it, and it reminds the group to stay focused on the task at hand. So think about again your group settings. Was there a person or were there persons there that reminded the group constantly that, listen, hey, this is what we need to do, this is our deadline, these are the kinds of things we need to be focused on, this is our objective? That person or those persons were occupying or were acting with respect to a task role. They were implementing a task role in their membership in the group. There can also be people that perform maintenance roles. And what are maintenance roles? Well, they're the ones that foster supportive and constructive interpersonal relationships, and they kind of keep the group together. They're the ones that make sure that nobody's kind of left out. They're more focused on the people within the group rather than the task, but they're both are. Well, returning to norms, we've used this term before, but let's define it now. It says here, a norm is an attitude, an opinion, a feeling, or an action. So it's basically all of the things that we've kind of seen before that help to or influence how we think and how we behave. And it's shared by two or more people, and it guides their behavior. So a norm's an attitude, an opinion, a feeling, or action. It's how we think or how we're likely to behave, and it's something that's shared by two or more people, and it guides their behavior. So you could potentially think of norms in groups that you've been part of. A norm, for example, can be that everybody gets their assignment done before the deadline or 2 days before the deadline. That's an action that everyone in the group shares. Okay, I'm a fan of the Yankees, the New York Yankees, and a norm in that organization. And if you play there, you have to actually not have facial hair. So it's just something that is shared between and among the players in that organization. And that's why it's called a norm. Well, how are these norms developed? Well, most times they're just kind of unwritten, understood ways of acting or behaving or even thinking. They can actually come from some explicit statement by a supervisor or coworker. So we can actually discuss and dictate to all in the group what your norm is going to be. So, for example, if George Steinbrenner, as the owner of the Yankees, kind of says, "Hey, listen, the way we do things here is no facial here," that would be an explicit statement. It could be some kind of critical event in the group's history. Let's say you're a part of a sports team, and something tragic happened where players perhaps died in maybe some kind of an airplane crash. Well, a norm that can be created from that can be everybody calls in with everybody before the game. Everybody kind of checks on everybody to make sure, and that was created by some kind of critical event. A primacy is where the behavior is established because that's really the way we did things from the get-go. And so that's the initial approach, and it kind of becomes a de facto approach. And carryover behaviors are behaviors that people take with them from situation to situation. And that obviously can influence how you act, excuse me, in a new situation. So if you're in the old team, you all made sure and had your assignments 2 days before the deadline, then you might carry over that into the new team, the new group setting, and then you actually see that behavior becoming a norm. Well, the benefits of norms you should see, they help the firm actually go through and establish that norming phase. And it helps therefore the group or the organization to survive. It creates that cohesiveness necessary for them to perform. It says it can also clarify or simplify behavioral expectations. People want to know, how am I supposed to act? What is my identity here? And it can help do that by creating these enforceable policies, not necessarily written policies, but enforceable policies to give you some direction as to how you should behave. It helps individuals, of course, avoid embarrassing situations. Knowing the norm helps you to do the right thing and not kind of look out of place. So, for example, let's say you're working in an organization and the norm there is to dress formally. You don't show up on Monday morning in a pair of jeans and feel kind of embarrassed that you're not dressed correctly. And they clarify the group's or organization's central value and unique identity. Knowing the norms of an organization normally tell you a lot about their culture and what they stand for. When an organization has a specific norm, you recognize. So if a norm in an organization is hard work, or everybody in that organization tends to stay, in that group I should say, tends to stay late, then you would probably think that that organization was high or prioritized diligence and hard work very